Hi, I'm Marty Kelsey, and welcome to the STEM in 30 Mission Debrief. For those of you new to STEM in 30, it's an Emmy-nominated TV show for middle school students. Today we have a great guest, someone that was involved in the SR-71 Blackbird program. This is all a follow-up to our show about spy planes. That show was filmed at the CIA headquarters as well as the International Spy Museum. Today is going to be your chance to ask questions. So you can send us those questions on Facebook down in the comments section. You can go to Twitter at STEMin30, or you can send them to us on email, stemin30@si.edu, and we will get to as many of those questions as we possibly can. We've got a great audience here in the museum today, and hopefully a lot of you watching online will ask a lot of questions. But before we get started, let's take a look at that recent show about spy planes. Check it out.
Junior agents of STEM, come in. Do you read me?
We've been given a set of documents. Agent X gave us a photo that we need your help analyzing.
While Marty and I are in the field gathering information, we need your powers of observation to analyze what we collect.
Having this box over here.
Get here, quick! Have you all figured out who our Agent X was? I'm joined by Colonel Walter Watson, Jr., who was the only African American to qualify for the SR-71 Blackbird program. Walter, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to be with you.
So this program is predominantly for middle schoolers, and I want to kind of start out at a basic level here. Sure. Tell us about the SR-71 Blackbird.
The SR-71 Blackbird is the fastest air-breathing airplane ever made. It set speed and altitude records that still stand today. We talk speed, we're talking Mach 3 plus, which is about 2,100 miles per hour, altitude about 85,000 feet or 16 miles up. So that's what the SR-71 is known for, speed and altitude.
And what was its role?
Its role was strategic reconnaissance. It was used to go out and observe things for the National Command Authority, the President, so that he can make decisions dealing with the military and national policy.
So were you taking pictures? Were you recording other things?
We were doing all kinds of things. Taking pictures is one part of it. The other part is electronic information gathering.
All right, so we've got questions coming in. If you're watching on Facebook, be sure to put them down in the comments section and they'll come here and we'll ask Colonel Watson. Now I want to take a step back before we get to you in the Blackbird. Let's talk about you as a middle school student.
Surely.
Were you a good student?
Middle school was pretty good for me. I was well, I guess nowadays you would call him a nerd or a geek. I was in the science fair. I built science projects in the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. I competed on the state level and then national level. In fact, I came to Baltimore as a 9th grader to compete my project in the 9th grade. So middle school, science and math were the subjects I really liked.
You struggled a little bit in other areas though, right?
Oh, I struggled. Before I got to middle school, I had reading deficiencies. And in fact, they had told my mother that I would never make anything better than a D in reading. And my mother was an aspiring elementary school teacher, and she said, okay, what do you want to read about? What would you be interested in reading? So she provided books for me about space monsters, airplanes, and flying. And those things helped me along the way, and she encouraged me. Those kind of things helped me when I got to middle school because now I was not afraid to tackle reading. Before, once the teachers told me what was going to happen, I was kind of resistant of trying to get into reading, but that was a good opportunity for me to overcome those shortfalls.
What would you tell a kid that's having some struggles in reading right now?
The best thing I can tell anyone is if you have a challenge, you need to commit to it. You need to commit to being good. Don't worry about not being good at first, because most people are not good at something the very first time they try. You know, most people don't come out running, they crawl, and then they eventually start walking, and then they can run. And since we're talking about that, you said I was kind of involved in the SR program. And there's a difference between commitment and involvement. And I'm pretty sure middle schoolers may be able to understand that. If not, their teachers will. If you want to think about making a distinction in those two words, think about breakfast. Think about breakfast with bacon and eggs. Well, the chicken is involved, but the pig is committed.
That is awesome. All right, so we're getting some questions in. Nicole sent an email to us. Thank you for sending that email, Nicole. How did we know that when we were flying a spy plane over enemy countries that they weren't using satellites to track the plane?
Well, truth be told, Brian and I, when we flew, we didn't have any idea who was tracking us above us. We had an idea who was tracking us from below. But what we really knew was whether they were tracking us from below or above, they could do nothing about it. That's what we really knew.
Now you say they couldn't do anything about it. Why not?
Well, it's very hard to hit a bullet with a bullet. We were traveling at better than 3,106 feet per second, and it's very difficult to hit something that's moving that fast. I have no doubt that they were probably able to pick us up in the air, because this is a very, very large airplane. And when you move through the air that fast, you generate a lot of heat. And that heat gives you a signature, and they probably could see that.
But you didn't care because...
Didn't care in the least.
Awesome. All right, we've got Jacob wants to know, what types of spy planes are still active today?
Still active today. The largest group of spy planes are remotely piloted vehicles. That's the largest group. You still have the U-2, and you still have some other airplanes called Cobra Ball. They're 4-engine, big KC-135 type airplanes. But the largest group, I would say, would be your remotely piloted vehicles.
Okay. Gibson wants to know how long the SR-71 spy plane would stay in the air at one time.
Okay. Let's talk about an average mission. An average mission would probably be somewhere around 5.5 to 6 hours. Think about that in distance. 5 times 2,000 is 10,000 miles of space that you can cover. The airplane can survey 100,000 square miles in 1 hour. So you didn't have to stay up a long time, but you went by real fast, take a quick snapshot, and you knew pretty much what was happening in that area.
Wow. Did those missions feel long?
When you got back. While they were happening, you know, you're so busy, you didn't really have a good sense of being airborne that long. But when you got back, you knew you'd been airborne for a while.
But if you were up there and and you got hungry or whatever, that was easy to take care of, right?
Certain things are easy to take care of. If you look at the helmet, it's got a little flapper on the right-hand side where you can feed yourself water, or you can ingest tube food like an astronaut. You could go to the bathroom, number one only. Number two destroys $250,000 worth of equipment.
Because you were effectively in a spacesuit.
It is the same spacesuit that the shuttle pilots use.
Tell us about the suit.
The suit is a 7-layer device that basically contains your whole body at about 63,000 feet, thereabout. I think that's where it calls Boyle's Law. If you had a glass of water at 63,000 feet and you were holding it in your hand, it would boil. And the same thing would happen to your blood with the water in it. So that's the reason why you're in the spacesuit. The suit is fitted to you at a specific time and weight. It doesn't expand very well. It's supposed to be that way in the event you have a loss of pressure. The suit is going to inflate and keep your body at a 25,000 foot pressure altitude, which would allow you to survive. The whole idea of the spacesuit is in the event you had to bail out at 85,000 feet, you'll be able to survive down to ground level. If you bailed out at 85,000 feet, you're going to fall 63,000 feet thereabout before the parachute opens. So you need to understand where you are, because if you were to bail out over Pike Peak, which is about 14,000 feet, what would happen is if you didn't pay any attention and things weren't working, you'd bail out and you'd fall 63,000 feet, hit Pike's Peak, roll down about 300 feet, and then the chute would go poof.
That seems like that would be a bad day.
That would not be a great weekend, no.
Ian wants to know, how far does a spy plane fly? So let's talk a little bit about the distances that you would cover, you know, around the Earth, but then also how high did you guys go?
Okay, on a routine mission, we routinely cruised at 80,000 feet. How far we would go would depend on what kind of air refueling we would do, and we did refueling nearly every mission. So let's pick a place. Let's pick Washington, D.C. We could go as far as, on a routine mission, we could go to England, United Kingdom, Europe. We could survey Europe in about 25 minutes and come back, and all of that would take us maybe 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours. Maybe 3 hours.
Wow. Now, when you came in this morning, you looked at the tail number on this airplane and you flew in this one.
972, yes.
Tell us about some of the missions that you flew on.
I flew in a variety of missions. We're talking primarily operational missions because the training missions are all flown pretty much the western part of the United States. Operated out of Air Force bases in the Orient, in Japan, and we would look at the places that you would suspect. Any place that had any hostile forces like in Korea, near China, near the Soviet Union at that time, now Russia. And then in Europe, anything in the European theater that had to do with the old Warsaw Pact, and in the Middle East. So mostly what we call PARPRO, which stands for Peacetime Aerial Reconnaissance. That means that we're not necessarily going to fly directly over you because we don't have to. At 70,000 feet, 80,000 feet, we can see almost 40 miles left and right. So it's not like we have to fly right over you to see what's going on.
Wow. All right, so when we look at the plane, how many crew members were there and how did you get in?
Okay. There are two people in the airplane. There's a pilot in the front. My pilot was Brian Schul. There's an RSO, Reconnaissance Systems Officer, in the back. And some people will say, if you look at it, you can see there's a third hump there. And that third hump, it's got a single window, maybe about this big. And we would say that's where R2-D2 goes. But what it really is an astro tracker that sits behind me. The number of crews in the squadron at any one time might have been about 12, which is about 24 guys. At that time, it was all guys. And the way to get in, as the canopies come up, we go in on the left-hand side of the airplane. And it takes a couple of people to help us get in. If you've ever seen a picture of us and it looks like, you look at the boot, looks like we have on spurs, we do have on spurs. And what that spur is, it's got a ball socket in the back, and there's a ball that when we get into the seat, we hook that ball over. And the reason for that is, during the ejection process, what that does is it drags your feet back into the seat. Because if you let your feet flail outside at Mach 3, well, your right ankle could be twisted around to your left ear, and you'll walk funny for the rest of your life.
Wow. Joshua, age 10 from Delaware, wants to know, have any spy planes ever been shot down?
There's never been an SR-71 shot down. Out of the thousands of missiles that have been fired at it, we have never been shot down. The beginning of the SR-71's promise started on May 1st, 1960. And the reason why I use that date is on May 1st, 1960, a U-2 was shot down with Gary Powers in it. And it was shot down not necessarily by one of their best missiles. Nowadays, it's called an SA-2 guideline. It's not the best one, but they managed to shoot them down. And then Kelly Johnson and Ben Rich went to the drawing board with slide rules and papers and pens and designed this airplane so that it would not be susceptible to that.
All right, Rob wants to know, was it hard on your body when you were flying in this airplane?
The answer is no. It's not necessarily hard on your body, but you have to treat your body well so that it won't be. You're in a situation where you're breathing 100% oxygen, so your ears are going to get saturated. So you need to be aware of that. You need to be aware of what you're eating before you go fly. And I think you probably heard me say this before. You're not going to go up to, on the way to the squadron to fly, you're not going to drive up to the Sonic and get the double large Coke with the extra chili dog with the extra onions on it, because that's going to create gas. And that gas, it's got to find some place to go. And when it does go, in the spacesuit, the ventilation comes around your waist, up your stern, and out on your nose. So at about 54 to 64,000 feet, you're going to find relief, but it's going to singe your nose hairs.
Well, you know, this next question leads perfectly into that. Did you have any scary moments?
You know, most aviators won't tell you that, because a lot of us will say aviation is hours and hours of sheer boredom, punctuated by moments of stark fear. Most of us are so, my wife would say, so arrogant that we don't think nothing's going to get us, and we're not. Another way she says it is, you're too stupid to be afraid. But the things that cause us, we call it having concern. Running short on gas was always a concern, because most of the time when we operated overseas, we're coming back to an island. So we didn't have a whole lot of options for landing. So those would be scary moments, running out of gas. The opposition or adversarial, we mostly thought we could counter them, but on occasion you would see something strange. I will tell you one thing that caused me concern. Brian and I were flying once, and he said, "Hey Walter, I see something out front." We're at Mach 3 and we're over 70,000 feet. And I'm thinking, what could he see up here? Of course, everybody's thinking UFO, and I'm thinking, well, we were in Nevada, so near Area 51, and I'm thinking, what could this be? And lo and behold, yeah, he did see something, because I saw it go by also. It was a weather balloon. So that's the only really stark thing that could really scare you, because they also have a cable between it. Had we hit that, that would have been very interesting, to say the least.
All right, we're getting a lot of questions in about the fuel in the SR-71
Sure.
Blackbird. And
Sure.
one of the things that I want to point out to everybody here in the museum and anybody watching online, there are Blackbirds on display around the country.
Yes.
And in the links, probably tomorrow, we'll post a link to something that one of our producers created called Blackbird Bingo. And it shows you where all the Blackbirds are around the country that you can go visit. And on most of them, when you see them, like the one here, there are little pads underneath the back of the airplane. Walter, why are those little pads back there?
Okay, there are a number of reasons. One, the SR-71 uses a special fuel. It's called JP7. No other airplane in the Air Force used it. We had to have special tankers that carried JP7. JP7 is a very, very high flash point fuel. They told me during training that you can take a bucket of JP7, put it in front of you, light a match, and throw it in there, and the match would go out. Well, I begged off on that experiment, so I don't want to see that, I trust you. But in order to ignite that, if you ever watch an SR-71 in the engine start, you'll see a green flame come out. Well, that green flame is from a chemical called triethylborane. We call it TEB, T-E-B for short. In order to light the fuel in the SR-71, we would dump TEB into the engine, and boom, that would light off the JP7. The other reason why you see that there, the SR was made well before some of the metallurgical advances we have now. The airplane has really got gaps in it. And those gaps are there because as we fly at Mach 3, the airplane heats up and the metal expands and closes off those gaps. If you were looking at us in California on an August day when the outside air temperature is above 100, you can literally see gas pumping out of it 6-7 feet into the air. And we may pump out maybe 1,000 pounds of gas just taxiing from the hangar to the end of the runway. Because we really want to get the airplane started, get it off the ground, get it up to speed so we can close off and stop that gas from leaking out.
That's awesome. And teachers, this is a great real-world example of thermal expansion if that's something that you teach in your classrooms. We're getting a ton of questions in here. Remember, if you've got questions, put them in the comments section on Facebook. We'll get to as many of them as we can. If you're watching with a class, tell us your teacher's name and how many kids are watching. We'd love to know that, and we'll give you guys a shout out. Patricia wants to know, how long did you train to be able to fly a Blackbird?
Okay. The long story short is I entered the Air Force in 1971, and I didn't set foot on the SR base until nearly 12 years later. So the process was 12 years. But the training for the crew, for an SR crew, is about 1 year. When you get there, you go through almost 7.5, 8 months of simulator training. You fly a T-38 for companion training, so you won't just be walking around not having any currency in an airplane when you get there. Earlier, people asked, well, what's that training like in the simulator? And for the more mature adults in the room, if you've ever had a root canal, imagine going into the dentist and saying, hey, let me have a practice root canal on Monday, let's follow up with another practice on Wednesday, and then let's top it off on Friday with a double practice on Friday. That's what those simulators were like, getting a practice root canal. At about the 7 or 8 month period, you start flying the airplane as a crew and getting used to everything you saw in the sim, seeing how well it matched up with the actual airplane. And my hats are off to the people for Singer who built the simulator, because it was very convertible to the airplane itself. A lot of similarities between the sim and the airplane. Of course, the simulator is a controlled environment. Once you take off in an airplane, everything changes.
Did you always fly with the same pilot?
I did for the first 4 years. I flew with Brian Schul. They did that so that you would train with the same person that you were going into combat with. It would not be something that you would have to get used to in a stressful environment. You know one another's quirks and their idiosyncrasies. And I flew with Brian for 4 years, and then I flew later with Bernie Smith and with Rod Dyckman.
Awesome. All right, let's see. Dylan, who's a homeschool student, wants a shout out. Dylan, thanks for watching. We appreciate it. We've got another question here, wanting to know about how you took off, wanting to know if it's an airfield or off of a ship. How long was the runway that you needed for this?
As most of you may know, temperature and altitude has a lot to do with the takeoff roll. On a real cold day in England, the airplane literally jumps off the runway. We took off the runway. We did not operate off a ship. We could probably get the airplane off the ground in about 4,000 feet. With the two J58 engines on a cold day, let's say like it's going to be tomorrow night, like 18 degrees, the airplane screams and jumps off the ground. On a hot day like in California, we're going to roll a little longer. We may roll maybe about 5,000 feet. Keep in mind that we operated in Europe where the typical runways were 8,000 feet long, not 10,000 feet like we had in California. So it didn't take that much runway because the airplane really jumps off. Now, let me back up a little bit and tell you, I told you the good part, let me tell you some not so good part. On a real cold day in England, or any place for that matter, if you took off and you're screaming down the runway and getting ready to rotate and take off at maybe 3,800 feet, 4,000 feet. If it's extremely cold and you lost an engine, you're pretty much going to have to bail out because you don't have enough rudder authority to overtake that engine that's really running. So you have to make a decision real quickly.
Wow. Harry wants to know if the Blackbird had any weapons.
The SR-71 has no weapons on it. The two weapons that it has, actually 3 weapons that it had, one is speed, second one is altitude, and the third one is stealth. The airplane was designed after the A-12, A-11, which was designed to be a high altitude, high speed interceptor that carried a large rocket in the Chine Bay here. But they found out it's very difficult to launch that rocket at Mach 3. You know, if you're going along at Mach 3, you drop this thing in the airstream, it tends to tear itself up or bounce back into you. So they had to come up with a better idea.
And for those of you watching, we've got a shot of the Blackbird from up above here that you can see, and it's lit really, really well today, and we were talking about it earlier. It's hard to light this airplane because it is so black and it seems to just kind of absorb that light. And so even just doing something as simple as lighting it here in the museum, you can really kind of tell that stealth technology. We're getting some great questions. Let's see. Do you know what the United States does to protect ourselves from spy planes? Or do any other countries have spy planes like the Blackbird?
There's no other airplane like the Blackbird. That's the first answer. The Russians/Soviets were always trying to develop something to either counter it or to be similar to it. They have problems with their technology. especially if they can't steal it from us, they have problems. To protect ourselves from this kind of observation or reconnaissance, we use all kinds of techniques, everything from subterfuge to publishing things in a way that only the people here know what's going on and not so easy to do. We do a lot of things to protect our resources. A lot I wish I could talk about, some I guess I better not talk about.
All right, Gibson's watching. Thanks for watching, Gibson. And Logan wants to know, what was the first plane you ever flew in and how old were you?
Oh, geez. The first airplane I ever flew in was a T-33 Shooting Star. I think it was also known as an F-80 back in the day. I flew that. I think I was about 19 or 20. I was in summer training as an ROTC student. And the guy I flew with said, hey, here's your little air sickness bag, and you're going to be sick. And I thought, well, why would he tell me that? And he gave me the bag, and we took off, and we flew around. And every 2 or 3 minutes, he said, are you sick yet? I said, no, I don't understand what the sickness is about. He said, well, let me do some lazy 8 and some loops, and we'll see if you get sick. And so we did that. I didn't get sick. I said, well, I don't understand the sickness part. He says, well, maybe get another airplane, you'll get sick. And I said, well, this one doesn't do it.
That is awesome. Daniel from Wilmington, Delaware wants to know if there were ever any mechanical problems with the Blackbird.
All the time, all the time. This is a very complex airplane. You have several systems, you know, hydraulics, engines, oil, pneumatics. There was always something that could go wrong. The biggest thing about the simulator was being able to teach you about those things that they knew had happened and could happen. But we were still finding out new things about the airplane. One of the biggest challenges is being able to separate what was a real malfunction from what was a phantom malfunction. Here's what I mean. As you fly this airplane and generate heat, gauges would do strange things. You may have a gauge, let's say the gauge goes from 0 to 100. Well, and it's supposed to be at 55. Well, you may all of a sudden see this gauge just go to 0. And you look at the gauge and say, okay, with the 0, what else connected to this gauge tells me that that's a real reading? And as you check around 2 or 3 other systems, you said, no, that's just a faulty gauge. Or you may see the gauge go from 0 all the way to 100. And that's a heat fail, and you'd have to figure out what happened. Most of the times, if this airplane had a problem, you knew it. One of the biggest things that we would have to deal with didn't happen often, but when it happened, it truly got your attention. It's a thing called an unstart. If you look at this airplane, it's got 2 propulsion systems that are almost 55 feet apart. When the airplane is flying at Mach 3, both engines are putting out thrust and they're both symmetrical. An unstart happens when the right or left engine, and not really the engine, but the inlet, stops producing thrust. So what happens is you got one side of the airplane doing Mach 3 and the other side of the airplane trying to slow down to something way below Mach 3. It gets your attention real quickly because it's almost like sitting on the seat and somebody just turning it all of a sudden and you're trying to figure out, okay, what happened? And that gets your attention, especially if you're in bad guy land, because you know the next thing you're going to slow down and come down, and now you're in their ballpark. They can get to you.
Wow. All right, Asawa High School students are watching. Thanks for watching, guys, as well
Asawa?
as Asawa?
In Japan?
I don't know.
I think that's the air base in Japan, Asawa.
That's awesome. And they want to know what kind of improvements do you think the Blackbird could have used? Like, what would you have changed?
Oh, geez. I would change some of the sensors on it. I would make them data link, i.e. most of the stuff we collected, we had to bring back and had to be processed. And I'd like to have a system where if the Air Force Chief of Staff needed information right this minute, he didn't have to wait till I got back. Now, he's not waiting a long time, but I wanted to make it instantaneous. The other thing is I'd like to work on the propulsion system. Mach 3 is nice, but Mach 5 would have been even better. I'd like to go even faster. The spacesuit. I'd like to make the spacesuit accommodate all bodily functions. all bodily functions, because you never can tell when you get a bad burrito.
What was the fastest you ever went?
The fastest I ever remember going is around 2171. And I don't know why that number comes to mind, but about 2,171 miles per hour.
Wow. Andrew and Aiden want to know how fast you had to go at takeoff.
The airplane took off at about 181 knots.
What's that convert to miles an hour?
Right at about 200.
Okay.
At about 200.
Awesome. Celia and Killian are watching. Thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate it. Kind of a double question here. Somebody wants to know where you grew up, and then what'd you do to prepare yourself to go into the Air Force?
Okay. I am originally from Columbia, South Carolina. To go in the Air Force, it was really, part of me was prepared for that because I wanted to go to college. I wanted to go into the Air Force, but I didn't think I'd ever be able to get in the Air Force. So the most fundamental thing you can do is do well where you are, bloom where you are. First grade, second grade, really focus on middle school. Middle school is really important. Make sure you have your math fundamentals, make sure you have your science fundamental. English and reading are really key things. Reading, if I'll say this 3 times, reading. As much as most people don't like reading, reading is the key. If you can get yourself into reading, you can conquer most problems there are, or at least know that you can't and where to go to get help. And that's a big thing. Don't be afraid to get help. By the time I left high school, I started to get things in place that would help me. And one of the things that helped me most is having somebody to inspire me. I'll tell you a short story. I met somebody when I was in the 10th grade, and this person would not have spit on me if I was on fire. And I went with this young lady for a whole year before she knew it. And later on, she became my girlfriend, was my prom date, and she inspired me through college and high school, through high school and college, and through my Air Force career. We've been married for 50 years. I can't tell you when the last time I thought about that.
That's awesome.
My sister says you need to bless my wife because she had to put up with a lot. But find something that inspires you, that'll help you prepare. Pick a worthy goal and commit to it. Remember what I said about breakfast and the difference between being involved with it and committing to it, and commit to it. If you commit to something that's a worthy goal, things tend to work in your favor.
Awesome. Walter, thank you so much for coming in today and answering all these questions. You all watching online had great questions. We appreciate you sending them in. We'll try to answer a few more of them down in the comments section, and be sure to tune in next month as we're talking all about exoplanets. Thanks for watching.